Hi there, my name's Arham and I'm an MBA candidate at Ivey Business School. My question to you is Canada is currently at an inflection point when it comes to the demands of mobilizing capital into productivity enhancing assets such as energy, digital infrastructure, and AI enabled firms. And from your respective perspectives, I'd love to understand obviously, one shaping Canada's market infrastructure and the other forecasting global macroeconomic conditions. What is the single most important structural change Canada must make over the next 3 years to ensure that private capital actually flows into these opportunities rather than remaining on the sidelines or leaving the country? Thank you.
John, you want to take the first shot at that?
And thank you very much for the question.
I always thought it was interesting that with all your experience, the hardest question we got came from the Ivey MBA.
I am humble, and I will be replaced.
Yeah, when I thought about this question, it was really hard to narrow it down to the one thing. But I like the advice that you got, is you got to pick somewhere to do. And we have to do things around execution certainty. So whether that is some kind of reform around project approval, multiple approvals in jurisdictions, things like that. If you know in Canada that you can get a power plant to power an AI site done or a new AI development site done, and you can get it in a reasonable time with a reasonable degree of certainty, because the problem with the time piece we talked about earlier is time costs money. And if you have that ability to create certainty that I'm going to invest this and I'm going to get a yes and I can start to build, then that will put us ahead of other marketplaces to do that. The inverse is also true. And I'll give you the anecdote on that. When you look at the last 10 years on energy sector, Canada was known as being the hardest place to approve energy products. You don't have to ask me. You can go to the cap table over there, and they will explain it all to you. Hardest place in the world to actually approve an energy project. What did that mean? It didn't mean that money didn't go to the energy sector anymore. It just didn't go to the Canadian one. It went to Texas. And we went from a Canadian market that had over 400 public energy companies doing $20 billion a year in capital to 180 last year doing $1 billion. So policy matters, and if you got policy that actually creates certainty that you can actually invest, the money will flow to it.
Francis, over to you.
We should have talked before, because I was just going to do that one.
I've got two more.
Maybe I'll do a different angle. It's actually a good thing when two folks from very different places come at the same conclusion from two different angles. But I once heard this line, and I think about it a lot when I'm asked questions like this, which is, it is not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And I have been feeling in Canada that this disgruntledness, this frustration that we feel is because we are being restrained. We can't run as quickly as we know that we can run. And it becomes down to speed up the time it takes from an idea to turn into metaphorical or literal shovels in the ground. But maybe I'll add one element, since we came to the same conclusion, which is that I once spoke to a developer in British Columbia. And he told me that he started his business 80% Canada, 20% in the United States. And now he's 50-50, and he expects to grow it until he's 80% in the US, 20% in Canada. And I said, what would it take for you to reverse this plan and go back into Canada? And he said, I love Canada. I want to invest in Canada. But the problem is, when I want to invest in Canada, I'm given a pile of paperwork that I have to navigate. And when I want to invest in the United States, the literal governor will call me and say, how do I help you with this? And I said, well, aren't you encouraged by this new government? And he said, Francis, I don't need one government. I want to see 3 consecutive governments of different political backgrounds who give me the certainty that you're describing, John, that this policy will be in place as long as my business horizon, which is not 1 year or 2 years, but decades out. Now, that's a very big answer to your question, but to unleash Canada and allow for that speed would have a transformative impact on this country.
That's a fabulous question. You will have the chair next year.